In this week's episode of Crossover Thursday, Locked On Cardinals, Locked On Falcons, the Cardinals are just trying to get a damn win.
And the Falcons are trying to get 2 in a row.
Let's discuss.
You are Locked On NFL Crossover, part of the Locked On Podcast Network. Your team every day.
Week 16. If you haven't appreciated football yet, shame on you. The season's almost over. It is for playoff contention for both of these teams, but it's going to be a fun match regardless. Alex Clancy, Locked On Cardinals. Aaron Freeman, Locked On Falcons. Thank you for making Crossover Thursday your first listen, now a part of the #1 sports podcast platform in Locked On. Today's episode of Crossover Thursday is brought to you by PrizePicks. Download the PrizePicks app today. Use code LOCKEDONNFL to get $50 in lineups after you play your first $5 lineup. As always on Crossover Thursday, keys to victory, final segment, most important matchups in the second segment, and irrespective of playoff contention or not, this is a popcorn matchup with really talented guys on both sides of the field. And the biggest storylines to kick off, Aaron Freeman, I'm going to come right out of the gate and talk about Bijan Robinson, okay? Under the guise of, let me pull my stats up because I did research for this show, the Arizona Cardinals, since their bye week in Week 8, starting in Week 9, giving up 148 rushing yards on average per game. And none of those teams were top 5 rushing teams at all this season. The Rams were the highest at 8th. They gave up almost 150 yards rushing last week against one of the worst rush offenses in football in the Houston Texans. So when I see Bijan Robinson on the other side wearing 7 with that big smile, I'm terrified.
Yeah, I watched the game last week, and I saw Jawar Jordan pop off a 50-yard run, and I'm like, if Jawar Jordan can do that against this Cardinals defense, then I think Bijan could do that a couple of times in this game. And so I think, Bijan's going to be a big factor in this game. We saw the last time Arizona and Atlanta went at each other back in 2023, if I'm not mistaken. That was the last time. Bijan had a big day that game because it came on the heels of a game where, the Falcons got criticized for not giving Bijan the ball enough. And so they were basically like, we're going to force feed Bijan all day long. And he had a very productive day. The rest of the offense didn't. But I think this time there's a much higher optimism that, it's not only just Bijan that's going to shine in this matchup, but also several other players on the Falcons offense.
Talk to me a little bit about the emergence of Kyle Pitts. We've kind of been waiting for this. I'm sure you were giddy going Bijan and Drake and Kyle Pitts in 3 successive years. It's like, oh, man, you've got the crux now. Talk to me about what's changed. Is it just Kirk Cousins, or is Kyle Pitts really emerging into a guy that people thought he was going to be?
He's been a lot more consistent. That's been the main issue with Kyle Pitts throughout his NFL career, just inconsistency. There have been issues with inconsistency this season, but he got off to a good start. He's grown into his role as sort of that check down option, that security blanket underneath for the Falcons early on in the season. And with Drake London out the last month of the season, he's been much bigger part of a downfield threat for the Falcons. The Falcons are doing a lot more to sort of lean into him and design some of the things that he's capable of doing. And if you watch that Thursday night game last week against Tampa Bay, you got to see that 3 touchdowns in the game the first time, or the second time he's had multi-touchdowns, but the first time he's had 3 touchdowns in the game, all career highs in terms of targets, yards, and catches in that game. And so you're seeing a lot more consistent version of Kyle Pitts. The one question is his production when Drake London is in the lineup is a lot lower. And so that's going to be a question going into this week. I don't expect Drake London to play this week, but he did have limited participation in Wednesday practice for the first time in the month. So he is on the mend. I don't expect him to be back this week. I think they'll probably save him for the Monday night game against the Rams, but certainly Kyle Pitts has been trending up all season long.
And that's why you're so good at what you do, because your transition is exactly what I was hoping for. The Cardinals with Michael Wilson produces a lot more with Marvin Harrison Jr. off the field, and he's been the #1 wide receiver over the last handful of weeks, especially when Marv is out, coupled with Trey McBride, who's obviously tight end 1, wide receiver 1, pass catcher 1 for the Cardinals. It's a fascinating thing to take away what's supposed to be the best entity on the outside, and Drake London was. He was special when he was healthy this year. And then you see that second option really emerge, and it's like, wow, why can't all of this exist at the same time? And I think that's one of the biggest issues. The Cardinals are facing the Falcons. Obviously, both of these teams are playing with their backup quarterbacks, both established guys in varying degrees over the course of their career. For me, like a biggest storyline, and it's difficult because it's something you flirt with and then it becomes super toxic if you hold too much onto it, is injuries. Okay, the Cardinals are the most injured team in football. They have the toughest strength of schedule from weeks 1 all the way through, and it makes it difficult for me to not, approach the conversation because it's part of the plot now. When it's so undeniable that there's so many snaps lost, especially from the rush attack that the Cardinals, anchored their offense on, not having James Conner and Trey Benson, neither of them since week 4. It's like, well, what are we doing here? So it kind of changes the scope of understanding and how much leeway you're trying to give coaches and players, where it's like, well, you're going to get fired because everybody's hurt this year, and this was supposed to be the year, whatever it may be. So it's been a glass cage of emotion for me, Aaron Freeman, for so many different reasons. But it's undeniable that Michael Wilson and Trey McBride have been the anchor for this offense, and so pronounced so that they're shattering numbers that anybody thought they would even do, even Trey McBride.
Yeah, I mean, me being as petty as I am, I remember doing a mock draft back in 2023 and had the Falcons taking Michael Wilson in the 4th round. And I just remember Falcon fans being like, that's a terrible pick. And I'm now sitting here looking at him producing over the last month and being like, it didn't look so terrible. But that's just me being petty. But you talk about injuries, and I think that's going to be a big part of the Falcons situation, where it's the will they, won't they, of whether or not they're going to dismiss their coaching staff at the end of the season. And certainly there is a case to be made that without the injuries to players like Michael Penix and Caleb McGarry, among others, obviously the Falcons haven't been as beat up as the Cardinals have been this season, but certainly they have dealt with their fair share of adversity when it comes to the injury bug. Will that be used as an excuse to bring back this coaching staff? And so ultimately this team needs to find ways to respond to adversity and all that sort of thing and pull out a win. And I'm sure the Arizona Cardinals are looking at this game, looking their chops, and sort of seeing a very winnable game going up against this Falcon team that typically struggles when they are the road favorite in games. I think they're like 0-2 or 0-3 this year when they're the road favorite, according to our friends over at FanDuel Sportsbook. But, this is one of those games where I think it's kind of a toss-up game, two very similar teams. The Falcons, at least based off of last week, are trending in the right direction. Obviously, the Cardinals are still trying to find a way to have their get-right game after, 6 games in a row losses. But, teams have typically had their get-right games against the Atlanta Falcons. And so hopefully the Falcons can avoid that again this year.
So this is something that, yes, and with everything you said is true. We'll get into the actual matchups with names on, jersey plates on the back of jerseys in the next segment. But this was part of the plot, and it's not as much anymore. The Atlanta Falcons, for those who don't remember, traded back into the first round of Los Angeles Rams and drafted defensive James Pierce Jr. So tell me about, first off, this was supposed to be – so Tampa Bay, the win for Atlanta last week really helped the Arizona Cardinals, because if Atlanta lost and the Cardinals beat Atlanta, the Rams would then leapfrog the Cardinals in draft order in the 2026 draft. Thankfully, the Falcons, for Cardinals fans, beat Tampa Bay, so that gave them an extra win, filler between the two. Was that trade back into the first round worth it at this point so far in his young career?
Well, the thing is, it's a two conversations, Alex, because James Pierce is doing everything in his power to make it worth the pick, right? He's leading rookies in sacks. He's potentially going to get double-digit sacks this season, which is far exceeding the expectations that a lot of us, including myself, had going into the season. We were like, oh, he'll get like 4 to 6 sacks and something like that. And he's, practically doubled that production at this point in time. The issue with the trade is that the Falcons basically came to the conclusion that this is the last piece to the puzzle, right? Mm-hmm. They're completing a 1,000-piece puzzle, and they're just slotting in this, these 2 young pass rushers and Jalen Walker and James Pierce as that final piece. And we're like, we finally fixed it. This team is ready to go. And they're having the worst season that they've had in quite some time. They look even further away than they did a year ago or 2 years ago from being in the playoff picture. And it's really, that's where the concerns with this trade is. It speaks to the hubris, the delusion, as we've termed it on Locked On Falcons, that this team is much further along. And so losing that first round pick, even though James Pierce is doing everything in his power to say, I am worth 2 first round picks, losing that first round pick is really going to be hard for the Falcons to overcome as they try to find ways to get better as a football team in the near future.
It's so important with the draft. I mean, it's very inverted what the Falcons have done. You're taking a tight end in the top 6. Bijan was obviously a no-brainer. Michael Penix obviously surprised everybody a couple years ago with that pick. Like, it's fascinating because if you look in Madden, I do say this with Kyler Murray all the time. Cardinals are great in Madden. Like you play them in a video game, super fun, super punchy, super everything, and then you get between the lines in a real football game, and it's not exactly transferable. So it's fascinating. I was just curious because that was part of the plot up until they beat Tampa Bay last week. Biggest matchups, most important ones. A lot of young guys for the Cardinals playing a lot of meaningful snaps. They're going to go against some pretty established talent. I'm excited to talk about that. Aaron Freeman locked on Falcons. Alex Clancy locked on Cardinals. Crossover Thursday. We'll be right back. This episode of Crossover Thursday is brought to you by Prize Picks. The holiday season is one of the best times for sports. Bowl games, big basketball matchups, playoff pushes. It's all happening at once. And while we're making all choices every day, one of the most fun places to make the right call is Prize Picks. And it's the easiest way to get in on daily fantasy. All you got to do, pick more or less on 2-player projections, lock in your lineup, and you're in the game. It's simple, fast, and available in 45 states, California, Texas, Florida, Georgia, just to name a few. There's a couple awesome new features that they've got. The early payout feature is a great one. So say you've got a 5 or 6 player entry and you nail the first 3 and, you got the afternoon games or something. Some have early payouts where you can get a little profit, cash out early, and not need to wait to see if the rest matriculates the way you want it to. And also, stacks feature is my favorite one. So say, with Bijan Robinson specifically, if you want to stack rushing yards, receptions, and anytime touchdown, you can do that all in one entry now. You weren't able to do that with Prize Picks in years past. Download the Prize Picks app today. Use code LOCKEDONNFL to get $50 in lineups after you play your first $5 lineup. That's code LOCKEDONNFL to get $50 in lineups after you play your first $5 lineup. Prize Picks. It's good to be right. Aaron Freeman locked on Falcons. Alex Clancy locked on Cardinals. This is going to be fun. A lot of points are going to be scored. I think a lot of, this is of course, I was eliminated due to Kyle Pitts last week in my fantasy football league. I've got Bijan Robinson, who's apparently going to run roughshod over the Arizona Cardinals. It's one of those where it's like, of course, after elimination, your team absolutely goes off. I'm looking at that this week. So most important matchups, I'm going to go first. It's been, for the entire season, the Arizona Cardinals offensive line versus the vaunted fronts that they've gone up against. Now, they've only given up 7 sacks in the last 3 weeks combined, which is a huge improvement over 5 a week, which is pretty much what it's been. Paris Johnson Jr. is out for this game. Number 1 Pro Bowl vote leader at the left tackle position is out. You're going to see a lot of backups. They played pretty well, but I'll tell you what, I feel like we've got a pumpkin coming, and this could be the game for that, even though the Falcons aren't necessarily known for their defensive front this year, but they've shown flashes of like, oh, that's what this defense can be. We've seen a little bit of both. So for me, that's my number 1 biggest thing every week.
Yeah, I think, the Falcons are, I believe, currently second in the NFL in sacks with 48. And so we're trying to get that 50 plus, which is something that the Falcons have not achieved in a very, very long time. I think, it's World War II or something like that was the last time the Falcons had that type of sack production. And yes, I know someone is commenting like, oh, well, the Falcons didn't exist in 1940. It's a joke, guys. Get a sense of humor. But, I think this pass rush, this really going to be the key. You got to get Jacoby Brissett, on his backside, because I've seen Jacoby Brissett carve up a Falcons defense in the past when he played for previous teams before he landed in Arizona. And so if you can do that, that's the best way that you can defend Trey McBride and Michael Wilson and all these guys from going off. And I feel like this is a good game for this Falcons pass rush to get going, carve up a bunch of sacks, and do what they did last week to Baker Mayfield, sacking him 5 times. And they're facing a much weaker, no offense, Cardinals fans, offensive line in Arizona this week than they were a week ago, facing Tampa Bay.
And pivoting to the Bijan Robinson thing that the Cardinals are going to have to deal with on Sunday is like, normally keep the guy in front of you, death by 1,000 cuts, things like that. You want 2nd and 5 instead of a 75-yard house call, things like, Bijan is so good around the line of scrimmage with the screen passes, the little angle routes. They run the weirdest route scheme for him, especially when Michael Penix was there. It's more traditional, it seems like, with Kirk Cousins. Like, you see Bijan Robinson, even though he had eight receptions last week, like, you saw him lined up wide way more than in the backfield, or he'd motion back to the backfield with Tyler Algier there. Like, it was different with Michael Penix. I don't know how you can stop this guy, especially when you're unable to stop anybody else on the ground of late. And it's not just on the ground. He's more potentially dangerous as a pass catcher because of his 0 to 60 speed. Like, Let me ask you this. How do you stop Bijan Robinson? And you can't say you can't.
Whew. I mean, the main thing is if you can get a lead early, if you're Arizona, you get a lead, you can kind of force the Falcons to kind of abandon the run and get into a pass first. That's really kind of your best strategy.
Okay.
Teams had success in the middle of the season, slowing down the Falcons' run game. But it wasn't like any specific thing where it was like, oh, well, this is the reason why. It's just typically the Falcons in those games just got off to a slow start and they were playing from behind a little bit too much. And that forced them to not lean on Bijan as much as they want to.
I don't like that answer. The Cardinals aren't very good at getting out the first quarter. They gave up the most points in the Houston Texans first quarter history last week. What else for you? What else are you looking at in this matchup?
Well, it's the opposite, I think, with Arizona, where you're looking at the Falcons' offensive line, which I think is vulnerable to this Cardinals pass rush, especially on the interior. I think Walter Nolan's coming on strongly. I know he's been in and out of the lineup throughout the season, but I thought had his best game last week against Houston. And then, of course, as Baker Mayfield called him, the Gigantor, Calais Campbell. Get some revenge against the Atlanta Falcons. And I think this is going to be the key for the Cardinals that, obviously the challenges with stopping the run, but when they are able to get the Falcons into passing situations on third downs, the Falcons have really struggled on third downs. And I think the way that you want Arizona, if you're Arizona, you want to play, you want to basically, Bijan's going to do his thing on early downs, and then you can get those stops on third downs because you can get that interior pressure. Kirk Cousins is not going to be moving around in the pocket. He doesn't do that. And then you get big old Calais Campbell, working back Chris Lindstrom and just getting his hands up on that 6'8" frame and just batting down passes. And that's the way that you can get stops for this Falcons defense or for this Cardinals defense against the Falcons offense. And so that, to me, I think is going to be the big challenge for the Falcons. Really that interior going up against the Falcons interior offensive line. And then not to mention Josh Sweat having a pretty solid season, and the Falcons backup right tackle, Elijah Wilkinson, who's been filling in for an injured Caleb McGarry all season long, typically struggles against good edge rushers as he has all season long. And so you have three potential favorable matchups on the defensive line for the Arizona Cardinals, and I think that could be a real big challenge for the Falcons offense. So
if they're able to get that push, I mean, Tyler Algier should be a starter somewhere else. I don't know how long it's going to take until he actually is. With Kirk Cousins, over the course of his career, there's really no rhyme or reason, even when he was in Minnesota, where it's like he's going to throw the ball 40 times or he's going to throw the ball 8 times, and they're just going to run the hell out of the rock. With the offense in Atlanta, do they have a problem just running the ball 35 times if it works? Are you going to be throwing the ball down the field regardless of how successful the run game has been?
That has not been as much an issue this year. There have been times in the past, particularly when Michael Penix was in the lineup. I think the Falcons were trying to do a little bit more to feature Penix and showcase what their young phenom quarterback could do, and they would abandon the run at times. That has not been an issue with Kirk Cousins in the lineup. And for most of this season, the Falcons offense is at its best when they're featuring Bijan Robinson and they can get into those more third and manageables. That's been a big problem. One of the reasons why their third down offense has been so bad is because they get constantly behind the chains, either because they're not having success throwing on early downs, running the ball on early downs, or they're getting killed by penalties, as they had almost a record number of penalties last week on Thursday night with 19 penalties that week. So the Falcons absolutely will be willing to be committed to running the football because that makes their offense just a lot easier.
And then wrap it up here. I mean, Trey McBride, Michael Wilson, do it again. I marvel. It's like Trey McBride's always open. Everybody knows he's getting the ball when he gets the ball. The Cardinals haven't had this since Fitz. I'm not comparing him. He's a wide receiver. Trey McBride is, in my estimation, the best parts of George Kittle and Travis Kelce. Travis Kelce was great at knowing his angles, was never the fastest dude, was never the biggest bruiser. George Kittle's a bowling ball. He has the ability to do both. And yes, his numbers are probably ballooned 20% from the garbage time numbers. And I want to ask you this before we move to key to victory, because we're football nerds when it comes down to it. When you're looking at stuff like this from afar and you see the gaudy numbers that Trey McBride and Michael Wilson are putting up, and then you look at the final score and it's a 20-point loss here, a 22-point loss here, 18-point loss here, how much of that do you attest to garbage time? Fourth quarter, 2 scores, 7 minutes to go, and the Cardinals are still firing? Or is this you know what? It's really hard to produce in this league. I don't care when it's happening. If you're producing like this, it counts.
I think when I watch Trey McBride, I don't think any of it is fake numbers, right? I think it's legit with him, regardless of what quarter it occurs in. He's very difficult to cover. It's going to be a challenge for this Falcon team, as it's been a challenge for pretty much every defense over the last few seasons. So I look at that. I don't look at it as fake numbers, right? Now, I'll take a shot at the Saints all day long during their primes where Drew Brees and Michael Thomas were padding their stats in the fourth quarter. But I think the Cardinals, at least with Trey McBride, is legit.
Keys to victory next. Yes, the first one's going to be turnover battle. Spoiler alert. Wait 10 seconds and we'll be back. Aaron Freeman, Locked On Falcons. Alex Clancy, Locked On Cardinals. Week 16 crossover Thursday. Thank you for making crossover Thursday your first listen of the day, and thank you for making Locked On the #1 sports podcast network. You already live your team every day. Now it's time to level up. Go ad free. Join the Everydayer Club today and get Locked On Cardinals and Locked On Falcons with no interruptions, members only Discord access, and more. All for just $5 a month or $50 a year. The link are in our respective descriptions. Check it out, man. We're leveling up. #1, baby. It's a wild thing, right? Yeah. Like we saw it coming, but it's a wild thing that we're here after all the years that we've been doing this.
Yeah, absolutely. I think of those first checks that we were getting that were, they were paying us pennies when you calculated it based off of the hourly rate. It was pennies on the hour that we were making, but we've come a long way as a network.
My first check in 2017, first month of work, 39 cents.
I think my first one was like $11, but that was because
I wish I would have saved it. That's the only thing I regret in my radio and media career is not saving that first check. Because so many people have busted their ass. I mean, we're so lucky here. We're so lucky. Keys to victory. Turnover battle. The only problem with this, Aaron Freeman of Locked On Falcons, is the Cardinals took the ball away from Trevor Lawrence 4 times and still lost weeks ago. So it's not an exact science anymore. The Cardinals have found ways to lose in ways that we didn't think were possible on this planet or probably other planets. But that's why the Cardinals cannot afford to turn the ball over. They need to take the ball away. They cannot give the ball up if they want to have a chance to win on Sunday.
Yeah, it's been like 4 games since the Cardinals have gotten a takeaway in a game at this point in time.
I think with Jacksonville. So 3. Yeah, 4.
Yeah, so Kirk Cousins, he'll give you the ball at times. He's a very chaotic quarterback. So you don't quite know which version of Kirk Cousins you're going to. Are you going to get the consummate game manager, or are you going to get the guy that's going to try to push the ball in tight windows? Kirk has been better this year, certainly as of late. I think throwing 9 interceptions in 4 games last year that cost him his starting job has led him. I'm going to just check the ball down to Kyle Pitts, and we'll live to play another down. You've seen a lot of that over the weeks, and then in the fourth quarter when they can go down the field and when he needs to make the throws, he was able to do that last week. So turnovers have been a big part of the Falcons. I know Locked On Falcons have heard me cite various stats about basically the Falcons, win like 90% of their games when they win the turnover margin, and then lose 90% of their games when they lose the turnover margin all season long. So I won't necessarily bore them with the same stats over, but yes, turnovers I think will be a huge part of this game.
What else on from your end?
Special teams. Both of these teams' special teams aren't very good.
Not great.
And the Falcons typically lose games because of their special teams, and because Arizona's special teams isn't very good. This is maybe one of the rare instances where their special teams may give them that slight advantage in this game, and in a close game, as we talk about turnovers, one big kick return, one messed coverage, one muffed kick and whatnot. That could really turn this game in a major way.
It's crazy that when you get to this point of the season and everybody's injured and you've got guys at, secondary, tertiary levels of talent, and then you've got practice squad guys coming up late. And I don't think there's a wider margin of this is a Pro Bowl special teamer and this is a practice squad special teamer. Like, it is so glaringly obvious when the Cardinals were not at full strength. They had a practice squad guy fumbled a kickoff last week after a Rams touchdown, or after a Texans touchdown that resulted in points. It's been a problem. Blake Gillikin, their starting kicker, has been on IR for the large portion of the season. Chad Ryland is slowly starting to turn orange into that pumpkin. Slowly but surely. It's not apparent at first, but it's coming. Yeah, I mean that's a big one for the Cardinals. They've given up big kickoff returns, big punt returns, and it's already easy to return the ball to the 35 now. Those extra 15 yards can be backbreaking. And I think really what it's going to come down to is Trey McBride versus Kyle Pitts. Like, if Kyle Pitts outperforms Trey McBride, the Cardinals aren't going to win. Like, you need 11, 12 receptions, 120 yards, and a touchdown or two for the Cardinals to win, because now Bam Knight is on IR. So they've got me starting at running back wearing number 44 like I did in high school, and that's going to be it. They're going to have to throw the ball so much. That's going to be it. It's Trey McBride and Michael Wilson. The Cardinals they don't got a chance.
Yeah, I think the Falcons make somebody else beat you other than Trey McBride, right? You're not going to stop him, but if you can contain him, particularly on third downs in the red zone, that's really going to be your key with slowing down Trey McBride and force Michael Wilson to make me look good, at least based off of that mock draft, and catch 10, 12 passes, 150 yards. He's done that so far this season, but like if that's what the Cardinals need to do to beat you, then so be it. And if Michael Wilson winds up beating you, then so be it. But you go into this game making somebody else other than Trey McBride beat you.
I think it's glaringly obvious that both of these teams are way too talented to have the records that they do. It's tough to watch because both of these teams, when healthy, are fun watch. They're popcorn watch. Aaron, if you could, and I haven't asked you this, if you could come up with one word that would summarize the first 15 weeks of the season for the Falcons, what would it be?
The one that immediately popped in my head was disappointing.
Yeah, and that's fair. Mine was duped. Before the season started, I said, if this is where we are watching this team midway through the season, late in the season, I will 100% feel duped. And here we are, me and my big dumb face. Aaron Freeman, Locked On Falcons. Alex Clancy, Locked On Cardinals. That was Crossover Thursday for Week 16. We'll talk to you on our respective podcast.